Thank you. Hello, Team Liquid Hacks 2.0 participants, people, and anyone who's just chilling out. Welcome to Pencils Down, Controllers Up. My name is Matthew Lee. I'm going to be your moderator for today. A little bit of background on me before we get into the main event, the main people. I have a little bit of experience in the collegiate scene. I played collegiate Hearthstone for 2 years, coached for 3, and was the president of the video games club there. So I know a little bit about some of the goings on the esports side. But I want to start off by introducing our 2 lovely guests. Our first one, you can find him talking about video games, anime, movies, and so much more for Wisecrack, CBC, TVO, and on his YouTube channel. He's a doctor of philosophy with a concentration in video game design-based curriculum development from Concordia University. And he's also the professor of video games, design, broadcasting, and esports infrastructure, and founder of The Conduit at Ryerson University. You know it's going to be a good panel. Basically, Dr. Alexander is one of the most qualified people on the planet to talk about video games and education. I mean, he literally writes the curriculum. On top of that, he's also a 2-time globally ranked video game player in Street Fighter 3 Third Strike Online Edition and in Lightstakers. Please be prepared to learn because he's here and class is in session. Give it up for the video game professor, Dr. Kristopher Alexander.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for that incredible introduction, Matt. I didn't expect all that. For you watching today, thank you so much for coming through. It's a pleasure to be here. Over to you, Matt.
Pleasure to have you, Chris. And our second lovely panelist, you may know him from his work as a producer on the Canadian Screen Award-winning documentary series, The Artists, about the first 3 decades of the video games industry. As the co-founder of IQ Esports, he's been helping to lead the charge on introducing video games as a learning tool, both in and out of the classroom. With a Master of Arts in Media Production and Digital Communication in Media and Multimedia from Ryerson University, he's the Director of Operations for The Conduit with Dr. Chris Alexander. On top of the entry-level experience that he has, he's founded his own esports education company and producing a video game documentary. He's also a former semi-pro Halo player and Magic the Gathering player. Please welcome the video game historian himself, Geoffrey Lechapelle.
Here's my guy.
Where is he? Jeff, get in.
It's immaculate timing. There we go.
There he is.
Oh, hey, there we go.
There we go. Hello.
Couldn't go off without a hitch. It's doing great. It's good to be here with that immaculate entrance.
Oh, man.
Woo! Oh, man. Oh, my God. Yeah, I can already see people in chat are blowing up. We are going to... It's gonna be great. It's going to be a great panel.
So excited for this one.
So excited. You guys doing good? You guys ready?
Oh, we're so ready. Let's do this.
Ready to rock.
All right. So I said a lot of words over the past 2 minutes. One of the words I said the most was The Conduit. Can you guys explain a little bit about, what you guys do over at Ryerson and what The Conduit actually is?
By all means, Chris, you want to take us away?
I mean, I could, and then I hand it over to you, Jeffrey. Let me get some
let's do it.
prompts popping. Oh, they might be a little bit too low, so I'll just leave it. I'll wing it. Okay, so The Conduit is a research lab at the Creative School. We focus on 3 core areas: video game design, that is how we create and shape and make an experience for one person other than ourselves; esports production, the fact that you can see my subtitles and yours if you're a part of the call in real time. Jeffrey and I teach classes about that. And lastly, collegiate esport infrastructure. We help to build facilities for the community and curriculum that directly ties their passion to profession. Let's go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and the idea overall is that we kind of have this chip on our shoulder that we think that video games can do so much more in the classroom, and there can be so much more that's done all the way from elementary school all the way up to university to use video games as a teaching tool. Incredible stuff that you can see being used today, like Minecraft Education Edition, which allows us to create all kinds of insane experiences in the classroom, all using games that you already play, but just redefined into a lecture tool instead of simply a relaxation tool.
Love it. So basically what we do is we focus on the things that extend beyond the playing of video games. Because we always say most people, when they're complaining about video games, they're talking about two core things: playing and parenting. So take away those two things. That's literally what we talk about: how we connect you with your passion and how it exists outside of there surrounding the playing. And we'll get into that as the questions flow in. Does that answer the first question?
That answers the first question perfectly. I mean, talking about all of that and like sort of delivering on something that is, you know, very selfless, right? Is a lot of people, you said, view video games as a very selfish thing. It's all about like me playing and me time, but sort of breaking that stigma and transitioning it into something that is like, it's education for all. It's something that should be seen as accessible and, you know, something that can change the way that we view the classroom, which is something I love. So moving on to our next question: when tackling the matter of esports and games and game design, you can go really, really wide, as sort of you covered in your brief intro of the conduit. I mean, like, you could tackle game design, digital media production, esports infrastructure, like pretty much anything under the sun you can loosely tie to video games and esports. How do you sort of create a balanced course load between all of those things where you can branch out into so many directions?
I mean, that's kind of the challenge, and I'll just set it up and I'll let Chris knock it down. Is the challenge we always joke about is when we talk to people and they say, you know, I'm an expert in esports. We always laugh at that phrase because it's like, it'd be like no different than saying I'm an expert in sports. If I told you that, you'd be like, okay, but which one?
Which one?
Like immediately. What do you actually do in that sport?
Yeah.
And so part of the challenge is defining the unique skill sets and breaking them up into teachable course design. Chris?
So we often talk about superpowers within the context of the video games and esports industry. And to summarize your point simply, it depends on the strength of the school. For example, done some work out in Finland where the core focus there is mobile development. Obviously, kings and queens of Angry Birds and Clash of Clans. So the focus there should indeed be around mobile game development. Well, you're looking at our university. We have different areas: fashion, photography, architectural design, all of these areas. So we try to move in those directions. And the courses we teach often have the students building out their own experiences from their perspectives and what it is they're trying to be when they leave our digital or physical grasps.
And for example, when we do stuff, when I mentioned IQ, when we do stuff with IQ, which is an independent organization, we'll often interface with like colleges. And so when we work with a college, which often has very nuanced, very specific jobs, we'll just try and identify what is that one job that school wants to be identified for. Is it broadcasting? Is it competition? Like at a previous institution Chris and I worked at, we focused on really trying to push the competitive side and then identify how to build out that infrastructure by attacking that one specific thing.
In summary, the approach that Jeffrey and I take is the same one we take with our playing. It starts with community. We don't go in and say, oh, this school should do this. Nah, we know, in Canada anyway, 52% of Canadians identify as gamer, which means we know that overwhelmingly in our population, we have game players. We find out what they do, we find out what they're in school for, and we build programs around that. You don't want to go in saying that we're going to start a Katamari Damacy team, and we don't even know whether or not they play that game. That's ridiculous. So we ask the community.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they'd be playing Beautiful Katamari is really the one where the esports scene took off. I mean, but besides that, I mean, your point to like playing to the strengths of your community and to yourself. I mean, both of you have extensive backgrounds in media and production, and you can see in this call as I point to both of them. I'm not sure where it is on the layout exactly, but that their media strengths are shining through, which is amazing. Thank you, Geoff. So talking about, thank you, Chris, for the hype resume. Talking about sort of, now that we've established that, like, okay, it can go wide and it is sort of a tool or a vehicle for education. What does gaming and esports, where does that vehicle let you go? Where can you drive that car? What can you do with esports and gaming that you can't really do with a traditional classroom setting?
Yes.
Yeah. What can't you do? Go ahead.
Yeah,
What can't you do? Exactly.
The crux of it is the interactivity. Allows you to build all kinds of new ways for people to solve problems. It goes back to every time you've been in a class and they've done a simulation or they've had you do a project that's more hands-on, that they've had you build something. That's really at its core what video games allow you to have, is it allows you to have that problem-solving interactivity right there in the classroom in more collaborative ways that have immediate feedback. You do a thing in a game, you win or lose.
In my classroom, for example, I teach game design, and that is how we create experiences for somebody other than ourselves. But each week in my class, physical or digital, I get a student to take control of my machine and play a video game that they've never played before to detail the theory. For example, during our week when we were talking about character, I hollered at Jeffrey and I said, yo, Jeffrey, usually when I teach this course, I play this particular game. Which game should we play this year? This guy responds with one word and then he hangs up the phone. He says, Florence. I say, oh, he hangs up. That means I got to get it. So this year, to analyze character, we played a game called Florence, which is an interactive puzzle narrative that involves clicking and dragging. Some of the students were crying in the class, no spoilers, but we were trying to detail character development through us interactively together as a community, engaging through that character development. So that's the way we do it directly. And with regard to jobs out there, Jeffrey, we could talk about the jobs we help students or they help themselves get this year at places like Red Bull doing media production, at places like Epic doing project development and production and producing, again, outside of the playing of games. But these are the areas that you can go. But again, it's always relative to the individual and what they want to do. And we say this a lot. People will hire you for what you can do. They do not hire you for what you can don't. That doesn't even make any sense.
Right. Exactly. And sort of speaking to the fact that like it is such a large vehicle for, you know, being able to dip into so many different pies and pots, it can place you pretty much wherever, right? Like whether that's like in media production or like in esports broadcasting or in game development or whatever, because that vehicle is so varied and because people have sort of this like underdog stigma about it. You know, you can just like no one says a dog can't play basketball. No one says someone with an esports degree can't do anything that they want. You know, like you just get that
dog can't play basketball. Yo, let me talk to them.
They made movies in the 90s about that.
It's Air Bud, yeah. But like you get the surprise factor of like just because you know you use something that isn't traditionally and conventionally seen as a educational tool or as a professional tool, you get to just, as you've done with me and anyone organizing this panel, just knock our socks off and knock the floor with us and just completely blow everyone away.
You're so right. And it goes so much further beyond just like OBS or systems like it. We're approaching the singularity where video game technology and media production technology mean the same thing. I'm pretty sure everybody watching this has at least heard of a show called The Mandalorian, which was made by Disney and LucasArts. And that entire show is made and driven by the Unreal Engine. I can't begin, and I'm sure Chris is pulling it up right now as I'm talking. Oh, brilliant. I can't begin to explain to the people on the call about how insane, perfect, the technology that drives something like The Mandalorian is. It's all called virtual studio production technology, and it's made using traditional video game design engine work. And what it does is it puts individual people inside of an Unreal Engine video game level where they can move and interact and do all their normal stuff. But it means that when they're doing the green screening, it's now a full virtual environment. So they can change elements of the environment on the fly. They can move the cameras, which track inside the engine as well, which is why when you're watching The Mandalorian, visual effects actually track behind them organically. That's all being processed in the Unreal Engine. So
talk about this one, Jeffrey.
Talk about this one. This is the most insane one. So you're going to see her stand up and you're going to see reflections in the wall behind her. You see that?
Yeah.
Fake.
No way.
Fake.
Look.
This is a green screen.
It's a green screen behind them. They're mapping those textures, those light reflect. Look at it. You can see it right here. All of those light reflections are happening via video game tech. This is not even the future, folks. This is the present. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Only thing that wasn't fake in that hallway was the thing he was going to interact with. And that's the grimiest part about virtual production, is he can actually pick things up in the environment and everything's being mapped and green screened live dynamically.
I love your use of the word grimy. Keep going.
That's really it. If you understand video game design, you can do all these things in media production. And where it gets really nuts is when we start looking at the things that groups like Riot Games have been doing with their productions all the way back 4 or 5 years ago, where you can see them using virtual production and virtual environments, using technology like video game design technology like Unreal Engine to do things like this.
Oh, you got it? Good.
So the singularity becomes video game design doesn't help you just do media production, it helps you do esports production as well.
Or just production in general, honestly.
Yeah.
Like as you know, like Mandalorian is there isn't a Mandalorian esports yet. I imagine Disney will as soon as they
Give it
hear
time.
that, will just claw into it. But as you said, yeah, you can go anywhere. You can shoot for the moon with this. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and to add to that, you were talking earlier about, Jeffrey, you were talking about OBS, open broadcasting software. This was completely free to use. We were teaching this in our esports production class last year, and mid-semester, one of our students got hired for a job because they needed digital technicians who could bring in RTMP streams, all the stuff that you're afforded the ability to do from software like this. So it's beyond the playing, it's engineers of the present and the future, all wrapped in one, all around a medium that overwhelmingly we all engage with and enjoy.
For sure. Definitely. All right. Moving on. Talking about, I want to get a little narcissistic and talk about yourselves for a second.
No!
A little bit. You both, I say, look, because I did a little bit of a dive, going into this, like looking at just like the stuff on your LinkedIn. You both took really creative paths here, through different, media jobs. I mean, obviously through the intro, like all the different stations that you worked for, Chris, and like all of the different production projects you've worked on, Geoff. You guys have come a really long way from just doing and gaining so much experience with a lot of challenges and ambiguity, right? Which can stop a lot of people, especially today, who are really young and really intimidated in their tracks. So my question really is creating your own career in esports and gaming still possible with how big it's gotten currently?
So I would start with a contextualizing quote from one of my favorite protagonists of all time, Alucard from Symphony of the Night. When you enter the library, he says,
"I'm interested in this."
And that is the crux of all of the decisions I've made in my career. I move towards the things that I'm interested in. For those of you who didn't hear that, he said, "I'm interested in this." And it usually stems from there. And because I love video games, usually what I do in some way bends back toward it. For example, the work that I did for my dissertation in an education factory talks about faculty, not a factory. Oh, did I say that? That was difficult. Anyway, in an education faculty, focused on the link between video game design and captivating students via engaging experiences in the classroom. For example, usually we captivate students via audio, text, and video, but my argument was that video games do it better because there's a layer of autonomy added via interactivity, which means you're in control of your own learning. And think about it. How long does it take when you round a corner and fall into a hole and respawn for you to get feedback versus you submitting and then fill in the blank with whatever you want at school? The answer is instant. So those properties should totally be ported or thought about being ported into classroom instruction outside of the fun bits, but also including the fun bits. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
In terms of using that, like that, those are all tools that can help you actually get out there, understanding how to talk to people, connect with people, how to actually showcase your skills and how to learn in school. But that core idea of, is it harder to get out into the industry and make your own career? No. In fact, it's easier. It's much easier. When Chris and I were each trying to build our pathways, like Chris was, I'm going to just call it out. Chris accidentally found out he was top 20 worldwide in Street Fighter because he just enjoyed playing it so much. But during the time that Chris and I were playing games really seriously, if you went pro, you would make a white hot 30 or 40 grand a year. Minimum wage.
Yeah, and that's Canadian 30-40 grand.
Yeah, so that's like 12 bucks. That's 12 bucks in a Big Mac in America.
Exactly.
So in freedom dollars. So in both our cases, we had a pretty clear choice, which was not to go into esports. We ended up both going to school. Chris got his PhD. I went and got my undergrad. I may have learned from a particularly interesting professor who had great, fun fact, Chris was actually my teacher while I was in my undergrad. And so in the end, both of us really, the opportunities were much more narrow, and it was much, honestly, at least by our estimation, wiser to go into university and go get a formal education than it was to go into esports. Most of the people who run esports now, who have built the teams, all of that, the vast majority of them just were forced to either decide, am I going to finish high school or am I going to go and make esports a thing? And that's not universal, but it mostly speaks to the lack of opportunity at the time. You had to like dedicate your entire life, sans university, sans anything else, to go and make this be a thing. Nowadays, all the infrastructure is built. These people put their blood, sweat, and tears into making this industry possible. And now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are more available jobs now than there ever have been. And so if you're willing to put that work in, not only can you just go do it, but higher education degrees now have direct connective slots into that industry. Be it if you have a social media or marketing background, if you have a sports management background, all kinds of things. And Chris is pulling it up here. There's a website dedicated to making this clear called Hitmarker, which brings you all of the possible jobs in the industry and walks you through where in the world people are hiring and what educational level they're looking for. And fun fact, nowadays, they're all looking for higher educated people who have the experience and the job skills, because now people have built the industry and now it's systemic. So there's more opportunity now than ever for people to make their way into the industry.
And you notice by these job postings here, none of them say video game player. I typed in the word writer, senior game writer, Respawn, content writer. A lot of these, Quantic Dreams, senior writer. Do y'all know about this? Hitmarker, I love you all. I remember we were chatting at the beginning. Don't worry. We don't work for you yet. Anyway, so I think it's a great opportunity for this and sites like Remote Game Jobs, remotegamejobs.com.
We are not sponsored by any of these people. We just think they're really good resources.
Where you can find jobs that align directly with your current superpower. All you have to do is be able to articulate what you can do. And the last one, I'll get in trouble if I don't add this one, XP Game Jobs. That's Canadian.
Local boys.
Let's go. So yeah, you have the opportunity to find out who you are within the context of industry by going to these job search sites, typing in your superpower, and see what comes up. You'll be surprised, especially when you read the description, how much you already know about the task. Let's go.
I mean, it plays to the central theme of like how wide it's gotten in terms of, you know, now that the groundwork has been laid, what used to be an industry that was predicated on, you know, are you the best of the best at this game? And if you are, you're going to have to grind and sweat until you're miserable. But now that that work has sort of been laid out, you don't necessarily have to be accidentally the best top 20 Street Fighter third online player in the world. You know, you have to have some sort of, again, a superpower. If you understand your own superpower, you can apply it to anything that you're passionate about. It's not just gated on, you know, professional gaming ability anymore, which is something that is absolutely dynamite for the industry.
Yeah, and I would even wager to say that video game play skill has actually devalued. It's been the value has the inflation on skill has meant that trying to get ahead based on your player skill is way harder than it used to be, because so many people are so good now that one of the hardest jobs to get now is being a professional player. Looking at something like League of Legends, I had this conversation with a student at the institution Chris and I were at previously a week or two ago. And we had this great thing we landed on, which is essentially that in just League of Legends, for example, there are 10 franchise slots, which means there are 50 slots to be a North American professional player, discounting the bench or the challenger teams, the farm teams, which means maybe 150 slots. And think about how many people in the West are playing esports, how many people you're competing against. That is probably the hardest industry to get into. But if you have any professional superpower, this industry is better than it's ever been.
Yep. I agree. I'm getting all excited right now. I really like what you said, Matt, at the beginning about the narcissist comment, because it really asks people to reflect on what they themselves can do. And I think that's the important part. You can say you can play, but often when you challenge either Jeffrey or myself to Legends of Runeterra or Super Smash Brothers, it's sort of like, oh man, they're all right too. Like, what is that? And that's how we say, okay, so what else can you do? Like, there's definitely something that you can do that you're really good at as well that can also add to this idea of playing a game very well. Because as Jeffrey mentioned, it's only like 1% of the population who actually, they have the space for going pro. It's like regular sports, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Definitely. The comparison is definitely there with the little lowercase or uppercase e, depending on how you fancy to spell the word esports.
No, there's an actual way, but anyways, go ahead.
I know there is an actual way. I've talked about it with Vivian before on stream. It's lowercase e, unless it's at the beginning of the sentence. It's lowercase e.
I know you knew. I was just trying to get you to say it. All right, let's go.
Continuing on our train of educating, right? There are people like you and Geoff that have the knowledge, they have the superpower. What about the educators out there who have sort of like the sparks, like their spark hasn't really ignited yet on discovering their superpower? They know that they can teach, but they don't necessarily know that they can combine all their media and video game playing background into being able to convert that into like education and helping others learn. What can you say, like what can you recommend for people that are trying to educate others on how to educate themselves and then pay it forward?
Ooh, I love it. Okay, I'll start, Jeffrey. You can.
This is all you, man.
This one. Okay, so I've been doing some work with this company you may have heard of called Epic Games, and there I had the option or the privilege of interviewing high school teachers who have their students in grade 9 using the Unreal Engine to complete their projects. Now, here's a specific scenario. A gentleman, I'm going to name him. His name is Nick Pant. He's an incredible human being. He uses the Unreal Engine to teach women's history and African American history in his grade 9 classroom. And here's what he does. He says, all right, I'm here to help and support you with the use of the Unreal Engine. I want you all to go out and build a museum that contains women's history and African American history. Go ahead. I promise you, Matt, the student work that came back, they had people teleporting giant walls, and they were talking with each other, community, to make sure that none of them had the same facts about women's history and African American history in their museums, but they were inadvertently engaging with the pedagogical material, the learning materials, as part of the process of learning the engine. Now, Nick is familiar with the Unreal Engine. He's learning it on his own, just like I'm learning it on my own. But remember, specifically with the Unreal Engine, you can look at it in 3 core ways. As a canvas where you can draw and create whatever you want. As a tool to assist you in the classroom. Hey, students, you can learn on your own, even though I'm not an expert. And as, what is the last one? As a playground for you to make engaging experiences for other people. So that's one way that I would implore teachers to consider using video game tech, is in the making of an experience for somebody else. Because fun fact, every teacher makes experiences for somebody else. There's very little difference between game design and classroom, engaging classroom design, I should specify there. It's just the properties of that align with the expertise of the individual teaching. So that's the start of a bigger conversation, but that's my small answer for that. Jeffrey, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
I got 2 small add-ons. The first one I mentioned already, which is Minecraft Educational Edition. They make it super available and super accessible, and there's a lot of pre-made stuff for teachers to play around with. It's especially good at the high school and elementary school level. And then the other one is that for any student who wants to, this is mostly for the students out there. If you want to throw a book at your teachers for them to read, I can't recommend this one enough. It was the crux of my master's paper, or one of the crux of my master's paper. Exploding the Castle is a brilliant book about how video games can be used as an educational tool in the classroom, as well as acknowledges some of the failing points around the misapplication around video games in the classroom, how you could do it wrong, which is always something we try to, paper over. Video games are perfect. You can do anything the wrong way and get the bad results. And this talks about how that happens. And it's a brilliantly explained book. This is a perfect one for teachers to read, or for students to throw at their teachers if they want to try and convince them.
For sure. I mean, it's just like Alucard said earlier. You just gotta find things that are interesting. You just gotta get in the library and find things that are interesting. I wanted to point out something someone had said in chat. This Blue Doki, thank you, Blue Doki. This panel's inspiring for someone like me who has a passion for esports but hasn't applied for a company out there. Yeah, I mean, that's essentially the whole point, is that it's not just limited to people that can play. I mean, you could go on Team Liquid careers and find all of the different things on their careers page, like back-end developers, like all the different stuff that they have on there are just so far and beyond. You won't even find a professional League of Legends player, please hire. Like, you are able to take your interests and just run with it. Boom, there it is. Chris brought it up.
Got you
Wonderful
covered.
little careers page. Look at that. Exactly.
It's all here, folks.
It's all there. It's all there.
You gotta do.
You gotta do. You got to do it. And I imagine saying that you were interested in liquid hacks. It's definitely not going to hurt. It's definitely not going to hurt.
Spectacular. I got you covered too with the B-roll. Don't worry, man. I got you covered.
I never had a doubt in my mind. So being a little narcissistic myself, talking about me a little bit, I'm a recent college graduate. I graduated class of 2021. Go Dukes, JMU. And from a complete media perspective, professors need to step up their Zoom and digital media teaching. It's really like a lot of times there's a lot of frustration and technical illiteracy that prevents them from really mastering the technology. Like for example, with these two fine folks, I spent the first 30 minutes of our intro call, no joke, with my mouth agape, my jaw completely dislocated on the floor, just with the amount of stuff that they like are effortlessly doing on this call. I can't stress enough, this call is not pre-recorded. This is live. I'll put a shoe on my head or whatever. But it's the ability to like that seamless technique and that elegant technique that they're here and showing on the spot right now. So where this is going is how effective has this presentation style worked for you both in and out of the classroom? And do you have any tips for professors that really need to, step their shit up, and also students who can learn a thing or two from, being able to just be like, hey, I can do this, you can do this too?
So in the last semester of school, not the fall, but the winter semester this year, we taught a course that was esports production. It's basically just this, like the OBS technology, and essentially, Chris mentioned this earlier, and essentially how you can build an entire setup for $0.00 that's compelling and interesting, and all the tech that goes into driving it. We ran that entire class like this, all remote, with the idea being that during lockdown, we could make the most of lockdown by teaching the tools that allow you to make the most out of lockdown. Going into the winter now, we're coming back to school. We're still going to run the class this way because it's so emblematic of the technology, and the students are essentially required to demonstrate their knowledge as part of the classroom. As far as it comes to the broadcast tech, this whole environment and the restrictions have bred some amazing opportunity around how to show what video games or just general OBS tech can do. What do you think, Chris?
I think that everything you said was accurate. I'm very excited to echo Jeffrey's sentiment by saying all this tech that we're doing right now is $0.00. All you have to do is want to do. So, but the other thing is, this has created an incredible opportunity. Fun fact, this is how we ended up on Liquid Hacks. Y'all saw our tech and they were like, yo, these guys, that's how y'all do it in the classroom. Shout outs to Vivian. And so we're very thankful that this happened, but also I believe that there's another wing of education that involves technologically aligned humans who want to do this sort of thing, right? And it's fine. There are different lanes for different superpowers, but I'm interested, for example, we're going to be working on some large scale courses that look like this, available to more than just our population, because we know we can have reach like this, teaching the kind of tech skills for, as we call, the hungry, the people who are interested in doing it, right? The only thing is, it does cost a bit of time. You yourself, Matthew, you asked me for some tips. I sent you some playlists, but you got into it because you wanted to do. And when we start having the conversation about who wants to do, then we can start solving some of these alleged issues about who wants to this and who wants to that. It's fine either way, but I guess we could be more open to be like, no, I don't want to go that far. That's cool. Well, you're going to teach this style of course. This style of course that Jeffrey and I teach, these are internationally capable style courses, and we intend on explaining that, how that is possible to our employers and beyond via opportunities like this.
For sure. I mean, I think the entire theme of this call today is going to be Alucard is going to the library in the video game vehicle. That's the call. We're changing the title right now, midstream. Alucard is going to the library in the ever-expansive video game vehicle. That's the stream.
I agree with that message. Go ahead.
So I think I'm gonna skip around a little bit because we are there are a lot of questions I think that could go down the same rabbit hole of like it's about drive. It's about wanting to make sure that you know what you want, and that when you know what you want, how to find the resources, what you want, etc. But one thing that I've experienced, and I'm sure a lot of college students experienced in the classroom, is the sort of the fatigue of cracking open a textbook or an article or like something very like heavily ingrained in academia and just like passing out. Like I was a communication student, and we were actually taught to skim academic articles because they knew like your brain is going to turn into mashed potatoes if you try and read this whole thing. So I actually wanted to pull a little bit of an article that Chris, you pulled quotes for. It's from the Toronto Star back in December of 2020. You discussed tips and advice on how important it is to present yourself, and make sure that looking towards the internet is one of the most important things as sort of a way to educate yourself and use as a teaching tool. Specifically looking towards YouTubers and Twitch streamers. As educators, have you both found success with that sort of model of pushing people towards more interactive ways to self-teach, like using video games and Twitch streamers and YouTubers? And how is that sell versus like, I want to use this instead of a textbook. I want to use this curriculum or this book that explains how interactive this can be instead of something from Pearson, like, let's say.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I do both or all three or more. So what we generally do is I'll point to an academic article, which is to be read before class, but then we actually talk about it. And in some classes, like next term, I actually build the theory in the Unreal Engine while I'm explaining that theory to the students to be like, man, this guy's crazy. He's talking about persuasion, and how that is how we guide a player without them feeling pushed into doing things. That's all video games generally are, if you really think about it. But I'm going to build those narrow corridors while I'm explaining it so you can see what I mean. But the other thing is, when you send humans to a obscure YouTube video that you've watched, they're like, oh man, I didn't know about this. They get to reach into your brain in terms of what resources you're going after. So I enjoy that, but also because I work with game designers, there's such a vast array of games. I can't give a video that talks about third-person narratives if somebody wants to make a point-and-click adventure like Gorogoa, for example. I can't do that. I need to teach these humans how to fish for themselves for their specific game. So that's part of what I enjoy. And as a teacher, for me, I like learning things and then telling everybody about it. Okay, this is how it works, to see what they do about it. And Jeffrey, he does the exact same thing. Go ahead, Jeffrey. I see you excited. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I think Chris is speaking to something really important, and to really distill it down, the really important thing, and shout outs to Vivian, because she and I went on a talk about this and went on a rant about this to each other for a while, is the number one problem that causes students, and I say this out of experience with someone with very serious ADHD. This is going straight to the core. The number one problem that we find with students opening the textbook and passing out is because right before they black out, they ask one simple question: why am I doing this? And that's the number one thing that we always try and address. Every course that we teach is always essentially industry driven. We had when we can, we bring in guests to the class to talk about industry. Whenever we can within the class, we are always driving to bring whatever we're teaching you back to that root cause of here's how you are going to get a job, or here is how this is going to impact your ability to do X or Y. And we always contextualize it in some reason why we are teaching you this thing. Some of the most brutal classes are things like math classes where you're just learning. You're just learning multiplication tables as a kid and you don't know why. You're learning them. Shut up, study, open the book. And that just continues forever, all the way up through math class until the very end. You go through engineering and you go, oh, okay, now I get it. That's the number one problem. And that's the number one thing that needs to get fixed when we do coursework.
For sure. I mean, definitely the end goal is so important, and like not necessarily the end goal. I don't think that's the best way to describe it, but the justification, right?
And that's the really important thing about, as a student, at the end of the day, you also can't offload the responsibility of not doing work. Like, you have to accept that you have to get this work done.
Yep.
And so the number one thing, and again, I say this as someone with really bad ADHD, you have to get the work done. You have to try and find ways to connect that work with some kind of motivator, be it career-wise, be it, some people find a really good thing of, if I do this, then I will go and do X, Y, and Z to relax. Things like that. It can either be in the immediate or it can be in the long term, but you also have to take ownership of what you're learning and really connect it into why you want to learn that.
For sure. For sure. It's all about connections. I wanted to bring up a question that came in through chat. Thank you, chat. It's from Hey at Zomi. How would you push or show the way to old school professors who are completely against online learning? What's something you could use to sell them this idea?
You want to take that one, Chris?
Well, yeah. So you say that's fun. What I enjoy about this question is, I will tell you right now, very blanketly, I love teaching online, and I will enjoy doing teaching online because, fun fact, I'm a Twitch streamer and a YouTuber. I enjoy engaging with my community in this way. I'm comfortable saying that. People should be comfortable also saying, I don't want to do online education. Right? And once we do that, you're going to see institutions saying, we like teaching online, where our professors are international. And then you'll see institutions that also say, we don't like teaching online. We want you to come to us. Strange how we want everything to be defined these days, but not whether or not you want to teach online or not online. I want to teach online indefinitely and forever, like this. You know what I mean? So if they're not wanting to teach online, they should just say it, and that's fine. What are we gonna do? You can't try to tell. Yeah, but I talked to Chris and Geoff and Matt, and they were saying that all this stuff could be done for free. Yo, if a human doesn't want to put in the time, we live in this era right now that humans are allowed to just say, "No, I'm good." But that might have an impact on how things go. Like many of you watching this talk today are probably saying, "Is this how Jeffrey and Chris's classrooms look?" The answer is yes. That's exactly how they function. And so now your brain has been like, oh my gosh, wait a second, because in that same article you referenced, Matthew, I suggested that online instruction is in direct competition with Twitch streamers and YouTubers. And I meant that in terms of camera quality, microphone quality, patience, and ability to multitask with their community at the same time in real time while answering questions and being knowledgeable in a particular subject matter area. Because right now, there are at least 19,000 people learning something from one person streaming out of their basement. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. I could probably guess what game it is right now. But even at this moment, regardless of what time you're watching this, if y'all play this later on. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Now, that being said, if you are trying to convince somebody about how to get into this or adopt these kinds of methods, we deal with this a lot with IQ when we work with different institutions. The number one way actually comes back to what I was just saying about providing motivation. At the end of the day, people aren't just going to magically want to because you made a convincing argument. It's not Professor Layton. It's not Phoenix Wright. You're going to make some compelling argument. There's something like, oh, you're right. I'm going to go buy an A7S right now. They have to have a reason to want to do it. And so often when you're working with admin, it needs to be a business case. Yeah. Why is it valuable to be international? Well, for them, it's pretty straightforward. What is the value of esports? You can also go down that road and talk to them about its similarities to sports and all the vocational opportunities that Chris and I have been ranting about. But when it comes to a teacher, they often, especially if they are from an advanced generation, they have often been doing this for 20, 30 years. They have a method they are comfortable with. Yep. So you need to find a way, and it might be understanding how they teach, and then find a way that how they teach can be realized online.
Yeah.
And it can't be, you just have to learn these 9 new things.
Yep.
They don't want to learn 9 new things.
Yep.
You need to teach them one thing that makes it cool.
Yep. And just to add on to that, there are ways to work around. If you can say, listen, I'm not a fan of technology or the way it works, I want to teach online. Well, think about it. You have all these broadcast schools, for example, they could in effect set up one studio as an online streaming space so that the professors, seasoned, can come in and be filmed and streamed live by a production team, or be provided something like this, an old iPad that just has the ability to switch in real time with the touch of a button. And you put icons on it and say, hey, all you have to do is press these pictures and you can zoom in and out. Try it on your own. You're automatically going live. There are so many options for anybody who, I'll say it again, wants to do. You have to start with wanting to do. If you say, I don't want to do, that's fine. When you're talking to somebody and they say, oh, I want to do, show me how. This is what my dad used to tell me. He said, son, you are very easy to parent because you would always come with questions. And when you ask me the question, it means you're ready to learn the answer. So when you say, I want to teach online, how do I do it? Uh-oh, there's your motivator right there because you said it. You said you wanted to know. All right, that's the end. I'm going to stop there before this turns into a lecture.
Oh man,
Too late.
I think also the important thing is that a lot of times it's like seen as, especially in the collegiate level, like professors are sometimes this like unapproachable binary of like they are this way, they're always going to be this way. I have no avenue of reach to them. But that's not always the case. And the good thing about university is there's not just one professor. Sure, you might have one professor for a certain topic, but there might be a whole department of people who enjoy media production, as Chris was talking about, that could provide a studio space, or people who are game players who do game development on the side that have that interest and might want to apply that interest to the classroom.
Agreed.
Like, yeah.
But
And like
something.
Go, Chris.
Even something as simple as you're a teacher who's been teaching a class of 500 for a number of years and you usually have a TA. Aren't you usually in charge of writing those descriptions? You could write in, must be familiar with online broadcasting, and part of their responsibility, offsetting marketing, grading, obviously, could be helping you learn, or not even just providing the live stream for your classes. Could be a thing. But again, you have to say, I want to do that. It's not about, you have to take the first step. And this was said before in a documentary by Carly Cywink. Her father said, you have to go to community. Community is not going to come to you. If you want to engage with the community that broadcast themselves online, you must go to community. I can't see all the IP addresses of y'all watching right now. I don't know. You're going to have to holler at a human from the community.
Yeah. And it's very important to also empathize with people who are not interested in getting involved.
Yes.
Because often, and this was the crux of my master's thesis, the whole generation that is currently in and this is a stat Chris would used to bring up every time we had a talk like this, is, and I'm almost inviting him to say it now, but every decision maker at the university and academic level who really can control these things is 50 years old and up. The average video game player is 30 years old. And the issue here is that those people who are 50 and up were heavily influenced by the satanic panic in the 80s, which you can see joked about in things like Stranger Things, but essentially this idea that Dungeons and Dragons and video games are evil and they teach you to kill. And that is a very, and it's something that is still around today, but it's almost incomprehensible how much more serious it was in the 80s and 90s. In the early 90s, the Sega Genesis game Night Trap was the foundation of a Senate hearing, and you can go watch the video from that C-SPAN article where people are literally there talking about how the video games are poisonous, and they can read on the box of cupcakes what's in a cupcake box, but they can't read what's in a video game, and it's very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to appreciate that that is the narrative that decision makers nowadays have been basically subjected to for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great video by this YouTuber who Geoff might know from the Magic the Gathering scene, Ristic Study, who does a great comparison on the Satanic Panic and Magic the Gathering's like early 90s, like early 2000s imagery about how like that was sort of tied together. If you have time to watch it after this, I highly recommend it. But moving on, because we are almost out of time, I wanted to touch on this. This was one of the last questions that I wrote down, talking about, we've talked about people, we've talked about how people can get into the industry, and we've talked about sort of the wide space of that industry, but we haven't really talked about the narrative that the industry sort of has right now. You see that a lot of companies that have a lot are sort of notorious now within well-informed gaming circles, like your Activision Blizzards, who's currently got like 3 lawsuits going on right now, CD Projekt Red, Ubisoft, EA, like these companies that are very well known for having very toxic workplace practices and like wringing everything out of their workers in order to like release something that's rushed, etc. Let's go on and on. when educating and using video games and esports and, you know, having that industry sort of looming in the background to teach professional development, how are you able to equip students and others with the tools to look out for and protect themselves from toxic practices?
Oh, that's great. I'll start with this one, Jeffrey. This is my favorite question to answer. First of all, it seems like all the organizations you highlighted are AAA companies.
Yes.
So it's very important. We can never say all things are one thing. Trust me, I know how disruptive that is to one's own life. So it's important for us to be nuanced when we're talking about things. For example, I mentioned Florence. I mentioned Gorogoa. I'll mention Virginia. I'll mention Black Sad. I'll mention Where Cards Fall. I'll mention all the Untitled Goose Game. I'll mention Raji. I'll mention the cat lady. Go ahead. Guacamelee. Let's talk about those companies behind those games and what their practices are. For example, my understanding of the Untitled Goose Games, one of the first titles where all 11 developers were compensated the same. A new model. Where's the conversation about that? It's like, whoa, they're trying something different. I enjoy these conversations because these are the conversations we have in the classroom. Oh, you're talking about the playing of video games, parenting, and AAA companies? Yes, it is a problem, but it's not everywhere. It's not that all globally ranked Street Fighter players are violent and they will fight you in the street. It's not true. Some of them might go on to have PhDs. So my point is, it's very important for us to be nuanced about these discussions and not generalize about an entire industry. I'm working on a video game right now by myself. If I'm going to burn out, it's because of your boy waking up too early in the morning, right? So that's how I deal with it in the classroom. I tell the students the lay of the landscape. I ask the students, oh, what are the stories you have? Okay. Well, what about all of the games we played this term? What about a fantastic game like, oh man, how could I forget it right now? Narrated by Queen Latifah.
Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Yeah. Come on,
yes, let's go.
Are you joking me, man? You want to talk about that game? You want to talk about games for Annapurna Interactive? Like, this is what I mean. You want to talk about Donut County? Let's talk about these types of narratives, these types of games that are being built so we can open up the dialogue beyond, yes, I acknowledge that it happens. Yes, I acknowledge that it exists, but we need to talk about the entire picture. Jeffrey, go ahead.
And to talk to the AAA titles, it's also important, like, people act like video games are this special hell in these big development companies, and nothing else is like this. At the end of the day, it's large format entertainment. When you're cranking out a FIFA title every year, its sales are several $100 million a year. You know what else bills for several $100 million a year? Major cinema industry films. And you might, if you pay attention to the film news, notice similarities in things that are going on there. Nobody in a video game industry job has been killed with a gun. And it's important to point out that the same malfeasances, the same issues happen in every major high-level entertainment industry. And we need better, broader systems that deal with all of that. We need better oversight. We need better negotiation blocks. We need better protections for people who work in those companies, because it's the same things that the film industry went through for 60 years. And we should be taking lessons from an industry that's 100 years old that operates with very similar creative practices.
However, Jeffrey, I will add something to that, and that is this. Now more than ever, with free tools like Unity and Unreal Engine, you could literally become the industry change that you wish to see.
Yeah.
Literally become it. And I'm not talking about, oh, well, I have to buy all these cameras. No. If you're watching this right now, it's likely that you can install Unreal or Unity on your machine. You could build your story. You can tell your story. You can prevent your own burnout if your ideas and your dedication to do are strong enough. So I often tell myself in the mirror that you got to be the change you want to see. You just got to do it. You got to do it.
Yep. And people act like that era is gone, where the Riot Games and people like that who build their huge companies, Mojang, etc. That era is gone. Look at the Valheim guys.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
They made what, like several $100 million in 3 weeks of releasing that game?
Yep.
I mean, Devolver Digital just went public.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous.
Yep.
It's definitely still out there.
Yep.
We're coming up on time.
Okay.
It pains me so much that we are coming up on time, because I could talk about this for 6 hours straight.
Should do this again sometime.
Oh, for sure. I want to thank my guests. I want to thank Dr. Kristopher Alexander, the video games professor. Chris, do you have any socials? Do you want to plug? Do you have a video game that you really want to share to get people to play?
The game that I really love playing right now is a game by Clay Interactive called Griftlands. It's a card-based tactical video game that involves you playing as 3 different narratives. I absolutely love that game, and I'm about to start Where Cards Fall. I'm on LinkedIn, and that's it.
And also on YouTube and on Twitch.
Oh, yes, I guess so. Yes, those places.
Video game professor. Geoff.
Thank you so much. If I'm recommending a game, I can't recommend, we've already brought them up actually, shouts to Devolver Digital. I genuinely can't recommend their whole lineup enough. And I've been getting a ton of fun out of a bunch of other games, that things like The Long Dark, which is Canadian made, all kinds of stuff. And in terms of socials,
there it is. For myself, I have been your moderator, Mr. Matthew Lee. You can find me at twitch.tv/ratthew_Lee. That's Matthew with an R _LEIGH. My video game to recommend is also from Devolver. It's Ape Out. It's a wonderful game. Love that game. Top down, really easy to pick up. I want to thank Zach Shaner for running production and just essentially sitting by and getting an hour to just sort of watch the magic. I want to thank Vivian Nguyen and Janet Fang for organizing Liquid Hacks 2.0. This has been Pencils Down, Controllers Up. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great one.
Take care, folks.
later, everybody. Thank you.
I got to duck.